what use do you have learning Lord of the Rings vocab when you're studying Spanish? You won't be able to talk to anyone. And guess who's laughing now, by the way? Guess who learned a language way faster? And yeah, like, trust me, I know. Yes, I learned like words that are less common, I suppose. I learned words for like magic and wizards and fantasy stuff.
That's not the point.
Exactly. That's not the point.
The point isn't the words you're learning. It's you're training your brain to be able to fluidly comprehend.
Just understand it as it's spoken.
Hear it and instantly understand what's being said without having to sit there and translate in your brain, and then you're 3 sentences past that and now you're lost.
Yeah.
That's the point. Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
My name is Kason.
And we are here to teach you how to learn Japanese quickly so that you can start playing JRPGs and never trust a rogue translator again.
You will have direct knowledge.
You will know what they said in Japanese.
You will be one of the enlightened ones. It's
Sorry,
great.
I'm being a little bit facetious there. No, a lot of people have asked us this over the years. Kason has developed a love, a passion for languages and has learned many himself. And so we figured we would do an episode where you can help people with all the stuff that you've learned, your techniques, your method for how you go about becoming fluent in another language quickly. And I think it does apply because I think a lot of people who watch probably would like to, if they could, play their favorite game in the source language.
In the original language,
be able to understand it. And, I would love to do that eventually one day myself.
Yeah.
So I've been learning Portuguese. I'm not nearly as far along in that language learning path as you are in some of the languages you've learned. So I plan on learning a lot myself today.
Well, good. I look forward to seeing what worked for me and what maybe doesn't work as well for other people.
Sure.
And maybe what you found has worked for you.
Mm-hmm.
I would say maybe top on the list, marrying someone who speaks that language is probably the best
step.
way to help, immerse yourself in the language a little bit.
Yeah.
So a little background for me, I do speak several languages now. And I have had a love of languages since I was young, and it's always been difficult because a lot of programs will promise results. Even school. I took formal classes for a very long time in high school and college.
Aren't those terrible?
They are awful.
I actually feel like they are totally useless.
100%. 95%.
One semester of French in middle school, another semester of Spanish, which then turned into a whole year of Spanish in high school. And I feel like in all of that time, I learned basically nothing.
Yeah.
Like basically nothing, like a little conjugation, like the rules of conjugation and a vocabulary of, I don't know, like 300 words, maybe like tops
in years. That's
like,
insane.
That's freaking terrible.
That's really bad.
Education's bad in this country. I will say that. That is my firm belief. But we could definitely do better.
It's okay. So I don't know if I've ever told you this. Have I told you how long it took me to become fluent in Spanish doing this method?
I am guessing, but I thought it was something like 6 months.
4 months.
Oh, 4.
I did it for 6 months. But after 4 months, I was fluent. I can listen to the news in Spanish and understand everything they're talking about. The news. That's actually my method here. My method for fluency, my measure for fluency is, can I listen to the news? It's new every day. They use a pretty general vocabulary, but some bigger words that you don't hear every day. And can I listen to a news broadcast and not have to be looking up words?
Yeah.
It took me 4 months to do that in Spanish. It also nearly killed me. We're going to get into that. But I can't believe it. I have spent years trying to learn languages, doing the typical methods. And it doesn't work very well until I hit on this method. And it's absolute madness. The way that you can actually become fluent very quickly if you just do a few things. I'm only going to mention one weird trick. I'm only going to mention a couple of apps here because last time I did a language learning video, I listed like 50 apps and I shared a whole Google Doc and I was like, here's how you learn a language. And it's not that helpful because everyone's different and some apps don't work as well for other people. Those are great apps. If they work for you, use them. especially the flashcard ones that you can just kind of do quickly. Like use them by all means.
I think
but that should not be your primary method.
I want to like hammer in this point. There's a lot of people who I think have used a lot of these types of apps and like been disappointed that, oh, by doing this app, I didn't become fluent.
Show me. Right? My hand is up. I did.
So I feel like a lot of people, they jump into it with these expectations or these hopes that if I do this for a year or two, really consistently every day, I'll be able to go to that country and be able to speak to people. And first of all, that's not a realistic expectation, even though sometimes in the advertising for these apps, they do say things like,
they do
start speaking this language in 2 weeks. Like that, they do it to themselves to a larger degree. Yeah. But I absolutely encourage people to use literally any language tool there is.
Use all of
just
them.
To practice.
Yes.
It's not going to hurt you.
Right, exactly.
It's just not going to make you fluent specifically doing one thing.
And in any reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
Like at all.
No.
There is one, however, that I have found works the best and quite well out of all of them. And that is the Pimsleur language learning method. It's actually extremely good at the very beginning. Most languages have more than one course. Most of the big, more commonly spoken languages have like 2, 3, up to 5 courses for some of them. I think Spanish has 5. Japanese probably has 5. But Swedish only has 1. So I did do that full course there. But I will usually kind of drop off the Pimsleur at some point. But it is that basic. You listen to the ads for Pimsleur, start speaking the language tomorrow. Learn a language the way a child learns a language. They all say that. This is how babies learned their language. Like, okay, they all do that, right? But Pimsleur actually works quite well. And especially for what I am trying to use it for, right? Yeah. So the very first thing I do when I start to learn a language is I use the Pimsleur method for that language. And that is my like foundation, right? So start with Pimsleur. Now, if you guys don't know what Pimsleur is, it's those like tapes that you listen to that movies make fun of because it's like you just hear the words over and over. And then a lot of it is actually in your native language, but they say, now you speak it out loud, right?
Yeah.
Now say, I want to catch a bus. And then you say it and then it tells you the right thing. And did you get it right or not? But it's the same thing every time. It's just like an MP3 file. It's just, that's all it is.
It's like a 30-minute lesson.
Yes.
Where you essentially just hear a phrase, well, especially in the beginning part of it, they'll break down like a really simple phrase.
Very simple phrase.
And they just repeat that phrase and different portions of that phrase and different words within that phrase, like a bunch of times for 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Essentially
it's wonderful. Yeah. Now, but they'll get you to say it too. Now say the word, and then you say it, and then, I got it wrong. Okay, and then you hear it again, and then you say it again, and then you hear it again, then you say it again, then you hear it again, and then you say it again. And that's actually how language learning works. You hear it, and then you say it, and then you hear it, and then you say it. You don't get to choose the pace, which is very important. It gives you a time to respond, and if you didn't respond during that time, you got it wrong technically, right? And then they say for each unit, you need to have at least like 80%. You need to have at least gotten 80% of it right for in order to move on. Otherwise, you're just going to start missing everything, and you're not catching it, right? So Pimsleur is really good. The only critique on Pimsleur is that it is kind of slow, but it's good. The method is good enough to justify the low amount of vocabulary that you're technically learning if you're going to be objective about it. The method is good, and it's a 30-minute thing every day. You can do it on your commute while you're driving or doing anything, like doing the dishes. I would do Pimsleur while I did the dishes. In fact, I began volunteering to do the dishes so that I can put in the headphones for a good, 25, 30 minutes and I'm speaking out loud the whole time, and no one bother me. No, don't bother Dad. He's doing the dishes. And I am helping. I'm cleaning the house, but I'm also getting some language learning stuff in.
Yeah.
So that is extremely important to start off doing, but that's not the only thing. So once you start off with Pimsleur, you're going to want to do 2 other things right off the bat. One of them is you need a good flashcard deck. A good flashcard deck that has, I don't know, I actually study sentences more than words.
Single words.
And that's why I actually don't study grammar. My method is 0 grammar. So if you hate studying grammar, guess what? We're the same. We're twins. And this is what you should do. Study sentences. The grammar is implicit in the sentence. You don't need to study grammar. Every now and then I've gotten a little confused at what's going on, and I have had to look up grammar points a couple of times. Do that as they come. Don't get bogged down with the grammar studies. That's one of the things that schools and some of these formal language teaching things get wrong.
Oh, totally.
Right? And the books.
It's almost like they make it about that instead of about like comprehension.
And you're memorizing rules and you're applying a math equation. And it's like, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be fluidly just comprehending it. And the way to do that is to memorize sentences.
I love the way you put that. Fluid comprehension.
Yes.
Because the greatest mistake that I have made in my 2.5 years of studying Portuguese is that essentially it was all in reading the words.
Yeah.
And, spelling them and like writing them down and, like putting them in the right order.
Yes, I know the app you're talking about.
Things like that. So I'm talking about Duolingo, which is like primarily what I've done.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of people, poo-poo Duolingo. I don't think you should. I think Duolingo's really, really, really good at what it does.
It should not be your primary.
But this is the point.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a strong grasp of grammar for Portuguese.
Oh, good.
I have also a very large vocabulary for someone who has studied as long as I have.
Very nice.
Probably know 3,000, 3,500 words in Portuguese.
That's quite good. That's quite good.
I have a large vocabulary and I understand how to structure a sentence. I cannot fluidly comprehend when people are talking.
Yes.
And that's because this is not the way our brains work in terms of, like you're talking about, a baby learning a language.
Right.
They're not sitting there writing and reading it.
Yeah, and applying rules. Oh, they did this rule. Let's see. How does that technically make the conjugation different?
They're hearing it and training the brain to quickly understand and fluently.
Yeah.
And I would assume that as part of that process, babies are somewhere in this range where like I can pick up half the words that people are saying around me, but I'm learning how to understand the broader context.
Right.
And picking up on the words I do know, and so I'm able to kind of follow. And so the mistake that I made is that the app I was primarily using was getting me into reading and writing and not into listening and speaking enough, not nearly enough. And what little it does do, it's like one sentence at a time, not like a 5-minute conversation or a person going on and on and on about a story that happened to them without any pauses or stopping.
Right. Because a lot of the grammar, the technical grammar, and just in English, even the sentence I'm saying right now is grammatically incorrect, right? The way people speak English with the breaks and pauses and run-on sentences and ands and ands and ands and all the ways that we put things there that shouldn't be just to kind of convey our point, the way English is typically spoken is not following the technical rules of the grammar, right?
Yeah.
So you may understand the way that they're written, but you won't understand always the way that it's spoken, right?
Yeah.
It's often different. Almost every language that I've learned, there's a difference between the written and the spoken. And Pimsleur is the best way to get into that method of just understanding it and then speaking it, right?
Yeah.
Now they do kind of speak it a little bit slowly still, but by not studying grammar, you're just going to avoid a lot of pitfalls. Now, you may have an advantage, but the thing is, the way that you're learning compared to a baby is that a baby will only understand half the words and still get the gist of the sentence. But when you're focusing on the rules of grammar, you kind of have to understand every single word that they say.
Yes.
And you're putting it together and you're lining it up. And if you missed one word,
that's my biggest frustration.
I don't know the whole sentence now.
That's my biggest frustration.
And that's not how babies are.
So my wife is Brazilian, and she will try from time to time. Maybe I'll ask her, let's just speak in Portuguese.
Yeah.
And I'll be listening, and it's like, again, I missed one or two words or didn't quite catch that. And my comprehension of that sentence is dead.
Yeah.
Like I just can't piece it together. Whereas I think through this learning method you're talking about, or with this being the focus, the way that it trains the brain to think about it, you will be able to do that better. And that's not to say like I haven't had times where like she's on the phone with her parents back in Brazil
and
I'm catching words and I know what they're talking about. And in particular because she's probably talking about stuff that's happened in her life recently.
Sure.
And so I'm aware of the story context.
Context awareness is huge.
This is a transition point
Thank
for you.
Very
I'm
much.
giving you a handoff.
Context awareness. This is why I use the news as my measure, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're following the news in your language, you can, at the very least, have some general understanding for what world events are happening. And then you jump into the foreign language news and you have some context into what they're probably talking about, right?
Yes.
Like there's a few things, and they're mostly controversial, so I probably won't name them right now, but there are a few things that every newscast in the world is talking about every single day.
Yes.
I know back in 2020 when I was studying Spanish, it was actually very helpful because the news of the whole world was all about the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Every news channel was about COVID-19. And that was it. That's all anyone was talking about for like 6 months. And that happened to be the 6 months I was learning Spanish. So I was like, dope. Everything I'm hearing again in Spanish, like the exact same things. Like even, the quotes from this professional or this thing or this country made this breakthrough and these people found this thing and here's a treatment. Oh, that doesn't work. Here's a treatment. Oh, that doesn't work. Here's something that this guy said. Here's how the virus works. And I'm like, this is technical stuff that I was able to understand in Spanish very quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like, that's just what everyone was talking about at the time. So I got all this chemistry and like this medical knowledge basically, and just whatever people are talking about at the time is what it's very helpful to be studying at least world news because that's going to help you as an entry point into the language, right? So context-dependent studying is extremely important, but there's another way in which I take advantage of this, and that's the second thing that I mentioned you do at that first month while you're studying Pimsleur. So get that flashcard deck of the first core 2,000 like sentences or something like that. 2,000 vocab words, but organized into sentences. So you're not just memorizing the word, you're memorizing whole sentences, right? Yeah. And then you've got the definition on the back. Just simple. I do a very simple flashcard setup. I don't do anything crazy. I have done crazy things in the past. I just do sentence translation, and sometimes I'll highlight the word, the key vocab word that sentence is meant to convey, and then I'll have that word highlighted on the back as well. So I see it on both sides, right? So it's like, okay, here's a word and how it's used. 2 birds in 1 stone. Great. Also, it's easier to study sentences than vocab because the extra words give you more context. But the other thing that I start doing is I find a movie or TV show that I am very familiar with, intimately familiar with, something that I never get tired of watching. And I find a dub for that in whatever target language I'm looking for. Now, the reason I say dub is because everything I listen to is always, most of it is in English, not really anymore since I know other languages. But the stuff that I consumed as a child and through my teenage years, that's the stuff that I tend to be most familiar with. Lots of Disney movies, lots of Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, the Matrix, Jurassic Park, things like that, right? Whatever you can get your hands on that is something that you are very familiar with, preferably from when you were a child, something that you've had a lot of time to just solidify in your mind and it's, for me, it's always in English. But if you're learning a different language and you're not a native English speaker, then if you're learning English, for example, and you grew up watching English movies, then great. You probably have a lot of this stuff, kind of a lot of the English sentences and phrases.
Here's another thing that I think is really key to this. This is also how you learned English.
Totally true.
You watched these movies as a child and you watched them over and over and over and over and over again.
Right.
I have seen The Fellowship of the Ring like 50 or 60 times in my life, probably more than that.
Yeah.
Right. I memorized the words. I memorized what they said. Yeah. We had a sleepover one time over at your place, and we started reciting Lord of the Rings word for word.
Yeah, we got through
halfway through the movie before we were falling asleep. Yeah. And the movie wasn't even out yet. It was still in theaters. We had seen it that many times.
It wasn't out on DVD yet. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is like some of those childhood movies, Disney movies I grew up with, The Dark Crystal, The Neverending Story. Yeah. I watched these movies over and over and over and over again. And I was, I don't know, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. So
you were
I was learning English by watching those movies.
That's right.
So you can do the same thing, and you already know the movie in your language,
right? Which is
so
the context.
You already know what they're saying because you've seen it so many times, and now you're going to use that same process, something you enjoy, something you love, to learn a new language. And you watch it over and over, and just like you did as a kid.
You listen to it over and over. Find an MP3 of it. Bonus points if you can find the audio description version of that file. I was able to find them for Spanish.
Right.
The audio description for the blind is what it is.
Right.
And they describe the action. So it gets you all the dialogue, and they describe the action. It's just nonstop exposure to the language the whole time. And it's describing the action as you're imagining it in your mind. Because I would just listen to this. I'd put on headphones all the time. So you take something like Lord of the Rings. I took Lord of the Rings and got the Spanish dub for it and listened to that over and over. Now, there are people who don't like dubs, and they think that dubs have to do weird things to fit into the speaking space and the lip movements, and sometimes it's not perfect.
Wrong.
It's not,
but it doesn't mean it's not really helpful.
Exactly
for this purpose.
Exactly, guys. The pros outweigh the cons. I know there are cons to dubs and to learning a language through dubs. Do it anyways, because the pros are so massively outweighing the cons. Yeah. It's not even a contest. If you're going to be a perfectionist about it, fine. But if you want to just be okay with the dubs being a little weird, trust me, the people who speak that language can understand the dub. They get it, right? It's if somebody spoke to them with those words, they would know what is being said. It doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes the dubs don't match the subtitles.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because the dubs have to do different things,
to
in order
match
to
the
fit.
lips. And,
but look, and that can be annoying for a thing that I'm going to bring up a little bit later. But the idea is you need to be listening to this language over and over and over, and not just stuff you have no idea about, stuff that you know the context of. Find a movie or a TV show that you love. Find a way to get it in MP3 form and just listen to that thing over and over every single day. I did this for like 8 to 10 hours a day when I was learning Spanish.
During 2020, during the pandemic?
This is how, the part of it was the pandemic afforded me the ability to do things I otherwise wouldn't be able to do. You cannot become fluent in Spanish in 4 months unless you are kind of
full-time
screwed
hours.
Up in the head. Yeah.
It's like becomes your full-time job.
It became my full-time job.
All day.
I found the longest battery life Bluetooth headphones, and I had them on all the time. And I would go through 2 of those a day, not through that. I would go through one of them and have to put on a second one. And the battery lasted 8 hours for those things.
Yeah.
And I would be on the second pair by the end of the day. So at least 8 hours. That's kind of how I measured it. If the battery's still going, I haven't listened to 8 hours yet. Often that was not any... We'll talk about some negative aspects of learning a language that way as well, because they exist. But it's not the dubs, okay? It's not the dubs. So while you're doing Pimsleur, find that media, listen to it over and over, and find a flashcard deck that just gets you the basic sentences. And then you're going to do something called subs to SRS. When I tell you about this freaking program, you're going to lose your mind. This is how to learn a language, you guys. This is on sourceforge.net. Somebody was able to, and this is brilliant. It is brilliant. Whoever thought of this is an absolute genius. But subtitles come with time codes, right? And if you feed into, it's simple programming language. If you feed into this program a video and give it the subtitle tracks in your native language and in the target language, it will spit out for you, using those subtitles, flashcards, using the translation and the target language as well. Using the native and target languages for that time code, we'll give you a flashcard. Here's the sentence in English. Here's the sentence in Spanish, whatever other language you're doing. And it will also clip the audio from that exact time code, and you will listen to that sentence being spoken in the target language. And it can also get you a screenshot from that time. It's all context. The more context you can add, the easier of a time you're going to have at doing this. It's going to help you to remember this stuff. And that's important. Some people want to I'm just going to beast it and just look, use the help that's given to you.
Sure.
This stuff helps. And at some point later on, you can say, I'm going to delete. This is one thing I did. I did this for Japanese. I would delete the text and just have the audio. And I'm like, I'm not following along. I have to really understand exactly what they're saying only by hearing it, not by reading it as well. And then see if I got it right and all that stuff. I use Anki, by the way, for my flashcards. Anki Droid. I have an Android phone. So this media that I did, for me, it was Lord of the Rings in Spanish. And I remember talking to people at the time, too, and they're like, what use do you have learning Lord of the Rings vocab when you're studying Spanish? You won't be able to talk to anyone. And guess who's laughing now, by the way? Guess who learned a language way faster? And yeah, like, trust me, I know. Yes, I learned like words that are less common, I suppose. I learned words for like magic and wizards and fantasy stuff.
That's not the point.
Exactly. That's not the point.
The point isn't the words you're learning. It's you're training your brain to be able to fluidly comprehend.
Just understand it as it's spoken.
Hear it and instantly understand what's being said without having to sit there and translate in your brain, and then you're 3 sentences past that and now you're lost.
Yeah.
That's the point.
You know, it was
that
really fun.
magical moment when all of a sudden you're like, I'm listening and I don't have to like think about it and I'm just understanding. That's what everyone's shooting for.
Yeah.
That's when you know that you have reached a certain level of fluency. I am not there in Portuguese. This magical moment has not happened
because
yet.
you haven't spent 8 hours a day listening to the dub.
Enough listening,
Yeah.
listening. And so I've started doing that this last week has become my commutes to work and back. And when I'm in the gym, I am just listening to Portuguese the whole time. Now, I think the mistake I'm making now is it's Portuguese that I'm not already familiar with.
Yes, you're trying to do new stuff.
I'm probably going to split it now to where half of it is that.
Great.
And half of it is listening to Lord of the Rings in Portuguese or whatever else I choose to listen to. So,
that's good.
Or I might start with The Last Wish.
Oh, yes.
The Witcher.
I have that in Portuguese,
because I've read the book like 7 or 8 times.
Yeah.
Something, or maybe 5. I can't remember how many.
That'll be so cool.
But like that will probably be what I'll choose first.
It's Avatar: Last Airbender. This is a very good one for me. I learned a ton. So Avatar is just a really good show. It's really fun, and it's translated into so many freaking languages. Right. I have that thing in Arabic. I have SpongeBob SquarePants in Arabic, by the way. It's freaking hilarious. It's wonderful stuff. But I have that. That show is available so widespread. It's extremely helpful. And that's a show that I don't have totally memorized, but I get the context around it. So often I will start out with, I will do the subs to SRS method so that I can develop a flashcard deck that is based on Lord of the Rings or some movie that I have basically memorized, Star Wars, something like that. And then I will also listen to that on repeat. And I will also listen to Harry Potter movies or Avatar: The Last Airbender as well, just to vary it up, just so I'm not getting too bored with listening to the same thing over and over. Because as much as I can do that, it does get a little bit old.
Yeah.
If it can get a little bit old.
It's probably good to build a rotation so that you're not just doing one thing over and over and over and over. Because I like even
you have to do that.
What
just
I'll
keep your
find
interest.
myself doing it, and I'm sure you'll get into this, but there's kind of like passive listening versus active listening.
Do both.
And it's good to do both.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll find myself passive listening when I don't mean to be, because the content is not exciting enough or whatever.
Engaging. Last Wish, dude. So get Last Wish on there, man.
It might be a good idea to have a rotation. So you don't just listen to this one thing over and over again. You listen to that, then you recycle it back into the rotation, bring up another thing, and then you just go through that rotation of 10 or 15 properties over and over and over again.
But always make or let the one that you develop that flash deck off of take precedence.
Yeah.
Let that one be kind of like the main deck that or the main audio that you're listening to. At least do that every couple of days, right? Return to it. You'll realize, I'm learning more each time. It also, it's a confidence booster, because as you get further and further in the deck, the more of that movie you're going to start understanding. So return to it frequently, because even though the entertainment value of it might be diminishing, the value of it in terms of, whoa, I'm understanding more this time than last time is just thrilling. Like, it just excites your bones and gets you stoked for life. And you see a future that you're like, oh, I'm finally getting there. I'm going to get there. And within 1 month, if you study most movies, I don't know, 500 flashcards maybe, within a month, depending on how you organize the flashcards, you should be able to get through most of that movie in one single month. And it's a blast to be able to understand an entire movie beginning to end.
I have a question about the flashcards.
20 a day.
Do you
I overdo it at
flip
first.
them? So do you start with English and then translate that into the language and then do it the other way?
Yeah.
Like, do you what I'm saying is, do you switch off?
I don't. No.
So you always go looking at the target language you're learning and then translate that into English?
For the first month, yes, because that's easier. We're going for confidence here. We're not going for, it's possible, like the better way to actually learn the language is to do the opposite. English first, and then you construct that Portuguese sentence yourself, and then see if you did it properly, right?
Got it.
That is extremely helpful. Month one, don't do it at all, because it's going to hurt your confidence, because you're going to realize how little you know. We're masking how little you know in this first month. Right, you're going to feel on top of the world.
This would probably be a good exercise for me, having a decent vocabulary already, but it wouldn't be a good idea for someone who's first learning. So like now that I have 3,000+ words in my vocabulary in Portuguese, reading the sentence in English and going, okay, how would I say that in Portuguese, would probably be a good exercise for me to stretch my vocabulary and what I already know. But I already have a basis foundation for that.
Yeah.
But if you're learning, just learning, like this probably wouldn't be the right way to do it. That's why I ask.
But that's fair enough. So if you already have a good foundation there, you could probably start doing that and see how it goes. But if it's troublesome for you, drop it.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of my method is actually to maintain excitement, to keep this fun as possible. As you're making progress, things are working. Whoa, oh my gosh, it's actually working. I can't believe it. This is actually working. I want to maintain that as long as possible. And sometimes that comes at the expense of what otherwise would be a very good method, which is to do it that way. For you should totally do that. Yeah. But if it's hurting you, if you find yourself at night being like, I didn't do flashcards all day and I don't want to do that right now, it's too hard on my brain to think of then stop doing it, because it will eventually, that's going to take over. And before you know it, you're just kind of going to stop studying it because it's too hard. It's too time consuming. Keep it as easy as possible. Right. So subs to SRS, using media that you're familiar with, listening over and over, even allowing yourself to just passively listen. It's okay, because whatever keeps you listening, whatever keeps you doing it every day, that's what's going to help you in the end. And sometimes you end up passive listening because you just don't understand it that well. Right. And you're just tuning out because you're like, I don't even know what's happening. Right. And before you know it, you're thinking about something else. Doesn't matter. It's still doing something. The brain is still processing audible stuff that's going on around it, even when you're not specifically understanding it right away. Right. It's still probably like if you're doing something totally unrelated and I say your name, Mike, you're going to pop up. That means your brain was processing the audio. Even if you thought you were ignoring it, your brain is, or maybe I don't shout your name. Maybe I just say your name. Maybe I'm talking to somebody else and you're not listening. And somehow in my conversation, I say the name Mike, and then I keep talking at my same low bass level. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, you weren't listening to anything I said, but all of a sudden you just turned around and, oh, they're talking about me, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's how the brain works with passive listening. It is listening. It is picking up things subconsciously. It's just not registering it into your consciousness, basically. Right. But it's picking stuff up. I'm not saying that listening in your sleep, do it, because it won't hurt. And if you can still sleep that way, I can't. I don't listen to it at night. But let's say it only helps a tiny bit. Fine. What is it costing you? If it's costing you nothing, then do it, right? All right, I'm going to move on down here. I start off doing flashcards 20 per day, and I hate myself.
That's 20 sentences.
20 sentences a day, and I hate myself for it after about 15 days or so, because the reviews end up stacking up. If you use Anki, it's doing what's called spaced repetition as a system, right? Oh. And it once you get something right, the first time you get it right, it sends it to you a day or two later. And then if you get it right again, it pushes it back to 3 or 4 or 5 days later. And then you get it right again. Now it's 10 days later, right? But it's going to keep recurring until you just get rid of the card. It will keep recurring, but the more cards you do and the more you front load your study time, then the more reviews are going to stack up in the back end. And that ends up becoming a problem for me. So I end up lowering it down to 10 or 15. I still think you should do that. Do 20, because what else are you doing, right? Yeah. Like, what else are you doing? Just start memorizing more stuff. And if it starts to become cumbersome, okay, start lowering your new card number, right? And then just deal with a lot of the reviews. You don't want too much of that, but whatever. That's what I do. I start it with 20, and then I do maybe 10 or 15 a day.
So how do you go about selecting which sentences are the most important to memorize or remember?
Yeah, so the most important one, so there's 2 ways. Pimsleur is going to give you the stuff that you need to just talk to everyday normal people, right? And your goal isn't to talk to anyone. Your goal is to understand the movie you're listening to.
So you're picking sentences from the film you're watching or from the audio you're listening to, and using those as your flashcard sentences.
There are decks of like, here's the top 2,000 most common sentences in a language. Great. Do that in the next month. Don't do that in the first. Well, you could do it in the first month. Just do whatever works for you, whatever you think helps you to grasp the language a little bit better. But don't let that get in the way of understanding the movie, right? That's the exciting, fun part. You want to do that as much as possible. If this is getting in the way of that, then you have to drop it. But if you have the time to do that as well, then great. Start learning those too, because it will come in handy later.
I wonder,
especially with the news reports.
Maybe you know this or not. So you're saying flashcards, it's just literally like an app that'll have like the sentence written down and you're looking at the sentence. I'm wondering if there's a way to do audio flashcards.
Yes.
So it's just
absolutely.
that sentence and you just hear that sentence totally out of context.
Yep.
You're not watching the movie again or listening to it in the flow of the movie.
And it's a random...
It's just a random sentence spoken out loud from somewhere and you go, oh yeah, what is that again?
Yes, and that's the fun part is like searching. Like when was this? And that's what I love about passive listening is because when you stop it and you begin active listening again, you have to kind of guess at what part am I listening to now? Oh, what's happening now?
So is this app you're talking about doing that with the audio?
Subs to SRS gives you little audio files of the whole thing, but you can set your flashcards to have no text on them.
Yeah.
You can set your flashcards to just be the audio of the English and the Portuguese for you. And no text whatsoever. Right. You can do that, absolutely. And you can also have it be a random assortment and all of that stuff. You can also create like just a study deck off of that deck that doesn't count towards anything. It's just a separate deck. And then you can change the rules for that one and say, hey, just give me any line from the whole selection of lines. Give me 50 random ones. Mm-hmm. And then you just listen to all of those. And it's really fun, actually. It's really fun.
Nice.
And to guess at what it is, guess who's saying it, guess at what part this appears at.
This is our new cat. we're adopting a cat from some friends who are allowed to keep it. So cool. It's getting to know its new environment a little bit. So I'm giving it some grace to explore the room.
I will allow it.
She's a little skittish, so she's just exploring and learning her new home. Anyway.
Okay, so now we've got to get to month 2 at some point, right? Because this is where some hard reality is going to set in. You're basically going to know this whole movie backwards and forwards, and you're going to have it memorized. You're going to know what all of these lines mean in your target language. And that there's nothing better than that, than to be like, I can listen to Lord of the Rings in Spanish and understand it completely. That's just cool. It's fun. It's cool. It's awesome. But month 2 is where we start adding a few more things into the mix. And the reason I focus on TV shows and movies is because they're simpler. There's long spaces where no one's talking, not that long, but long enough, longer than in an audiobook. You're allowed to kind of just think about what you just heard a little bit.
Sure.
In the in-between spots, right? Audiobook, it's just pure text. You have to stop listening to think about any of it. But at month 2, once you're done with Pimsleur lesson 1, you can keep doing Pimsleur as long as you want. I never really do it all the way through, except for in Swedish when it was only 1 month available. But I would suggest continuing it at least for a little bit, right? But you get diminishing returns with each lesson in Pimsleur after a certain point. Mm. And so what you're going to do now is you're going to throw audiobooks and newscasts into the mix, right? So instead of just listening to your TV shows and movies all the time, you're going to start listening to more dense material, more difficult material. And there's no way around this, man. It is going to be a blow to your confidence. But just know that after that first month, you're already past the beginner stage. You've already learned more than 2 years of like college language courses. Okay, maybe not college, high school, whatever.
Yeah.
2 years of formal classes, and you're already basically past the beginner stage. You're into the intermediate stage already, right? You just need to drill this and know that it's not that far away before you become fluent. But Harry Potter audiobooks are very good. They're in like 70 languages. I can't remember. Tons of languages for those books. Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, translated in tons of languages, audiobooks to go along with them. You mentioned The Witcher, tons of languages. I have actually gotten into reading Twilight. I have a blast with those books. I really do. I'm reading the second one right now in Swedish. And it's just fun. It's a fun read, especially anything's fun. Once you learn the language, everything becomes fun again, right?
Yeah.
It's just awesome. I will do anything if I can also, like if my wife wants to watch something and I say, does it have Swedish subtitles?
Yeah.
All right, I'll watch it. I don't care. Put on the Swedish subtitles and I will be so content watching any movie she wants, any movie, any TV show. She's into like Skinwalker Ranch and stuff. And
oh yeah.
Like, I don't watch that show. I don't really believe a lot of what's going on there. I think it's trumped up and a lot of nonsense. But with Swedish subtitles, I'll get into it, man. Like I will sit and I will watch that show the way I can't really take it in English.
Yeah.
But my wife loves it. So we do it together, and now boom, put on subtitles, and now we're talking, right? So it's actually it can help with all sorts of ways. It can make mundane, dull things become exciting again if they ever were.
Sure.
And that's super fun. It's just an absolute blast. So you're going to throw in these into the mix. Your newscast every day. Get your news from this source. One of the things that I do is there are like simplified news websites that you can use that give you the day's news for language learners, right? NHK has one for Japanese. Swedish has Artsidor, which is like the 8 pages. It just tells you like the news of the day for people learning Swedish. They're everywhere. Every language, every country that has an interest in people learning the language of that country, which is most countries, offer this type of service. It may be very simple, it may not be, but most countries offer this service. So use that to just familiarize yourself with the news. Also, I guess learn the news in English. I mean, I didn't ignore the news when I learned a language. I don't ignore it. But I really try to get as much news as I can from the target language, not from my language I already speak, right? So get an idea of what's happening in the world, and then turn all English off and jump into whatever language you're learning. And now you know the headlines, you know what people are talking about it, you know who said what, you know who did what, you know what's likely to be talked about. Now jump in and start listening to their world news. This is another thing. This is kind of like a side conversation, but whatever CNN reports in America is what everyone else reports everywhere else in the world. Mm. And at first, I was like kind of disturbed by this. Like this is a little the way when I would get news in Spain, I listened to BBC Spain actually.
Yeah.
And it's BBC, right? And they just get their stuff from CNN. And then Spain, I'm learning Spanish, right? Why am I going through BBC? Well, because they were talking about stuff I knew about, and that's why. Yeah. I tried to listen. I know I've talked to David about this before, but I listened to Cadena Ser in Spanish. It's like a local, maybe more conservative, like Spain news. Mm. And I didn't have a freaking clue what they were talking about, right? Yeah. It was so Spain that I completely like had this big disconnect. And I was context. Like, you know what? I think I need to have this international news that's the same everywhere. And that's actually a good thing. Let's use this to my advantage, right? And then once I get a handle on the language, then I can jump in and start learning. Okay, what's the local news now? What are the names of their local, politicians and companies and CEOs and who's doing what? They're celebrities, right, for them. But that's later. That comes later. You need to be okay with listening to CNN type level news for whatever country you're looking for, or like I mentioned before, Voice of America, which is NPR. It's American propaganda, but it's made so that you can understand American issues in a different language. That's perfect for learning the language. It's perfect. So there you go. That's what your months 2 through 4 are going to look like now. You're listening to the news. Here's a fun one. Find news sources that are clear and that have somebody talking with subtitles that you can read along as well. Because you're going to find these words. YouTube has the transcript option. You can open the whole transcript. You can click the words. It'll take you right to that place in the video. You can highlight, copy, paste. And YouTube's transcription is not perfect, but it's quite good. It's like 97%, perfect. It's like very good. But there are mistakes, and hopefully you just catch them before you memorize them. But for the most part, I actually found that newscasters tend to speak quite clearly. They tend to speak in a neutral accent, and they tend to have less obstructions to their voice, as you're listening, right? They're not like playing a music track underneath while they're talking. I tried to do video game playthroughs in other languages. Fun. Blast. Actually, a very cool way to learn the language, but not at the early stage. Yeah. It's later on, right? Because they're making jokes, and it's a different kind of thing. And there's often things going on in the background that make it difficult for you to parse the sentence into words. But find a YouTube channel specifically on YouTube that has that transcript feature, that has subtitled their news report, and you can like read along with it and look up words as you're going, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to feel very frustrating at first because you're not going to understand as much as you thought you understood because you can now watch Lord of the Rings in Spanish.
Right.
Well, it turns out that it's true. A lot of those Lord of the Rings words are not used in the real world. Okay, fine. The people win the argument, except they're like 2 years behind me in learning their language. And I just have a little bit of difficulty now in getting up to speed with the actual vocabulary that people actually use now in the world. Which, by the way, Lord of the Rings, yeah, there's some weird words, but for the most part, it's just how people talk. It's not that bad.
It's not written.
Neither is Harry Potter.
The screenplay is not written
right
in a way that is like totally divorced from sort of modern parlance.
90% of it is usable stuff that you're learning. Yeah. And the other 10% is fun. Like, you don't want to get rid of that. It's fun. That's what makes it fun and cool.
Yeah.
And now you can read Lord of the Rings because you know all those words from the movie, right? So now you jump into the book and you're like, oh yeah, I already know all this stuff.
Right.
So that's super fun. And then I have a few things here that I have to bring up at this point. I've already basically gone through everything here. You guys have my whole method now. You have the whole thing. Just find content that is engaging and meaningful to you that you can listen to over and over again, even in English, and not get sick of it. Now add the joy of learning a language on top of it and keep listening to it over and over. It's possible I don't know. It's a good way. It's a very good way to remain interested and to learn a language.
So let's see if I can recap this based on everything. So the very beginning is do Pimsleur lessons.
Yeah.
Do 20 flashcards a day and pick a rotation of media that you are already familiar with and listen to it every day over and over and over again in the target language. That's like your first month or two.
Your first month, you were doing that on repeat. Yep.
Those three things.
Yep.
Then as you're moving into month 2 through 4, you are watching news in the target language.
Still, and honestly, whenever I would get, what's the word? Stuck or upset, frustrated with learning the language, because this will happen. My brain's not getting, I'm not understanding, I'm not getting it. I will dip back into those movies and TV shows that I was listening to. I really never stop listening to them. It's just, it's harder to fit all of them in when I'm also listening to the news. I will listen to the news usually twice in the day. I'll listen to it once where I'm picking apart all the vocab and looking at all the transcript. And then I'll just passively listen to it again after that and see how much I remember. It's like drilling a flashcard at that point. It's a spaced repetition. Okay, I looked these words up 30 minutes ago. Do I still remember what I looked up? Yeah. Right? And half the time, no. But some of the time, yes. So that's fun. Take your victories and don't worry about the things that you're not remembering, right? Yeah. That will come with time. But whenever you're feeling frustrated or this is getting a little too hard, drop back to Avatar. Listen to 20 episodes of Avatar. There's like 61 episodes in that show. Like, there's a lot of stuff there. There's tons of Disney movies. Disney movies are dubbed into like 50 languages. Just go drop back into one of those. Get your confidence back. Right. Tangled was a fun one for me. That because I understood that movie very early in my study of Swedish. I was able to understand the movie Tangled. It's I don't know why, but for whatever reason, that movie almost feels like it was written to be in Swedish, and I was able to get it very easily. And so I'll drop back into that one, listen to that a lot. Okay, very fun, very fun. And then try to tackle the audiobooks again or something a little bit harder again. Follow along as you're listening as well. Helps a ton. And don't pause. If you're stopping to look up a word, let the audio keep going. Look up the word, find out what it means. You can rewind and listen to it again if you want, or you can look forward and try to find where it is now or where is it at now. Just don't be a perfectionist about it. Yeah. I tend to be a perfectionist with a lot of things. And this is a way that has helped to kind of break me of that a little bit, where like, you're not just going to perfectly learn this whole thing. It's okay to just keep listening or to let things go. Like sometimes I'll just let the audiobook go if ever I have to take the headphones out of my ear. Mm-hmm. I don't pause it. I just let it keep going. And then when I put it back in, I'm just like, oh, where am I at now? Just don't worry about being a perfectionist. It's a big deal.
Yeah. That's one thing that has held me back too, I think, particularly with the fluid comprehension part of it.
Yeah.
Is my brain gets fixated on that word I missed or that I didn't know. And so it's sitting there going, oh, wait, what was that? What was that? What was that? And I've already started missing what's being said after that. And so then now I'm behind.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you have to kind of accept the mindset, like, if there's a word you didn't catch, don't worry about it.
Yes.
Keep listening.
Yes.
Keep listening
Yes.
actively.
Yeah.
You will get it through listening through the whole sentence or the whole paragraph
That's
or
hard.
whatever.
That's hard.
But by the end of that, okay, I get the context. I think I'm good. Rather than fixating on that one word you missed and then missing everything said afterwards.
Exactly.
And then you're lost. And then, so that's what
It's not efficient.
I'm working really hard to try to break my brain of that.
Yeah.
And that's just how I learn generally. I'm not a person who can move on without getting this point first.
Yeah.
It's another reason why mathematics was hard for me. I'm not great at math because like I cannot move on until like I get this. And so I like drill and repeat that like same exact I don't know what you call it, the question, the prompt, whatever it is. And I would sit there for hours and hours and hours and like I could not move on. I'll let myself get it wrong and then just go drill some other stuff. I had to just like fixate on the one thing until I got it right.
And that's what happens when you study grammar as well, is that you do get into that mode of you've got to do it properly and perfectly.
Yeah, and I would do this on tests all the time.
Yeah.
Especially time tests. I'd get like locked onto one and not be able to move on.
My daughter is in that right now because her handwriting, she's got to do her handwriting perfect. And I'm like, just move on, do a quick thing and move on. Because she'll fail the timed test.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
Like if you have time at the end, then come back to it. Yeah. But don't like get fixated here at the detriment of like your time that you've dedicated to yourself to learn today. You'll hurt yourself in the long run.
Yeah, develop a short-term memory that can easily get rid of the losses but that remembers well the wins, the victories, right?
Yeah.
So because you might get stuck on that word and be like, oh man, and you'll get discouraged from the whole language because like let's say you do look it up and you're like, what? I've studied that word 50 times. How come I didn't remember it this time? And then you'll end up kind of getting frustrated with yourself and upset when it's like, no, you just learned 20 new words today. Like, don't get upset that you didn't remember that one. Mm-hmm. Now, I have that same thing. There's a few words where I'm just like, for some freaking reason, I can never remember this one word every time I see it. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, this keeps, and maybe it's too similar to another word and I get them mixed up or something like that. Every language I've learned, there's always those like really difficult words that for whatever reason, just I get hung up on. And I have learned to just kind of let them go and keep learning other stuff. You can learn 20 new words or you can waste a ton of time to really try to remember that one word that for whatever reason your brain is not grasping well. Right. Well, that's not efficient. It's not an efficient use of time. Right. And we're talking Spanish in 4 months, people. So like, we don't got a ton of time here.
Yeah.
There's one more thing. Okay. Say
well, the one thing I was going to ask you is I think there are a lot of people who are watching who are probably interested in Japanese.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people who
it's going to take a lot longer than 4 months for Japanese.
So is there anywhere in this that you would recommend a slightly different, or does it apply completely?
Yes, Japanese is different. Now, this applies completely to if you're just worried about listening comprehension. And that's what I go for. The only reason I'm learning Swedish is because I want to learn Old English. There is no movie dubbed in Old English. My method is wholly insufficient for the learning of a written language that's dead. Yeah. Completely is an utter failure. It's really good at tuning your ears and getting you to get listening and even reading fluency, but through the listening, right? The audiobooks, and it really helps, right? With Japanese, you have the addition of kanji, which is difficult. You're not, and here's the other thing: 4 months Japanese. Sorry, man,
That's not happening.
Not happening. Even with Korean, it was well over a year before I got anywhere close to this level and using this method too.
Yeah.
To the level that I have in Spanish. It was so frustrating for me to, in 4 months, be better in Spanish than Japanese or Korean.
Which you had studied for years.
Which I'd for years. Yeah. Years and years and years in Japanese and Korean. And Spanish, I cannot, to this day, I cannot understand a Japanese newscast. Like, I understand it, but not to the level I want to. Like, for me, after 4 months, it just clicked that I haven't looked up a word in 15 minutes. I'm understanding everything, right? It just clicked. And it was it was the dopest, like, coolest moment one of the top 10 moments of my life where I just realized I have been listening actively and comprehending, and I haven't looked up a word in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That is 1,000 sentences that I've heard. Okay, maybe not, but a lot of sentences I've heard. 100, maybe. A lot. And I have not had to look up a word. And from that point forward, it was like, I just understand Spanish now. I don't know what happened, but it just clicked. Japanese, I can just say that has still yet to happen for me in Japanese and Korean. And these are languages that I've studied for a very long time and that I can speak comfortably. I have had 20-minute conversations with people in these languages, but I cannot freaking understand a news broadcast in Japanese where I'm not looking up a word every 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And just Japanese is a hard language. It's a very hard language and years of study. And and it's very frustrating for me. It's very frustrating. And I feel like I'm still years away from like really, now Japanese newscasts and newspapers, they're famous for being difficult. Japan has a highly educated population.
Yeah.
Right. So when I'm listening to, something from not freaking Japan, like it's easier for me to use that news broadcast as a reference point and say, you're not fluent until you watch the news, right? And you got everything. Japanese news is difficult for Japanese people. And even reading a newspaper is difficult for people in Japan because until you're like 18, you don't even know all the Joyo kanji, all the 2000 like core necessary kanji to even be able to read a newspaper in the first place. You can't, even if you wanted to, read a newspaper until you're like done with high school. And that's like weird to think about in America.
That is weird to think about.
That's weird. Yeah. Now they can, of course, as you learn the more common ones first. And of course, like I get there's a list there, and even in English, sometimes I will have to look up a word because I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, especially if it's an article on science or, like with a lot of like the COVID-19 stuff. Yeah. But
technical terms. Yeah.
Yes. But the idea is that I have to do some kind of standard and I picked news and Japanese news is hard and it's hard to meet that standard. It's really hard to meet it. But the added issue of kanji is a big one. I use the book Remembering the Kanji, RTK, it's actually a Korean. No, that's Take Him. Take Him is a Korean name, but he teaches Japanese. He's great. I can't remember. It's like a German name actually, who did Remembering the Kanji, like Heisenberg or something like that. I can't remember the name though. But that's a workbook. And as it relates to kanji, just like put your head down and get into the books. And it's going to take you 6 months at least to just get up to that. And even then, probably longer.
Yeah.
But that's if you're only studying kanji. And that's where you can then start reading along with the audiobooks that you've been listening to, right? It's just harder. Yeah. So, years. It's going to take years for you to really learn Japanese. Even using my method of crazy immersion.
Differentiating being able to read it from being able to listen and understand it, though.
The listening has come easier. Yeah, Japanese.
So if you're hearing it spoken, you would be able to understand it a lot better than just like reading.
If you're following along, yeah.
Well, than just reading the characters.
Yeah,
right?
for me, because a sound means a sound. I don't have to memorize a symbol, right? Yeah. A sound, it is what it is. Even Cyrillic, it doesn't take that long. Even Arabic, it didn't take that long for me to get the alphabet because it's an alphabet mostly. There's a
that's the challenge is, you have an alphabet with 20-something symbols in it versus 4 alphabets, one of them with 2,000 symbols in it.
Well, it actually has like 20,000 symbols. The 2,000 are just the most common
ones,
used ones. Yeah,
right.
There's a bunch of others.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's freaking wild. Heisig. Yeah, that's it. Heisig, the Heisig method. I think I said Heisenberg. I was close. Japanese is a whole different monster, but this method will still work. And you can still get to listening fluency, but without doing the reading, which I mentioned before, get your transcripts, get your subtitles, follow along. If you can't do that, this is just going to take longer. Yeah. This whole thing's going to take longer. It's less efficient. You're going to... I use voice to text a lot for Google Translate. I rely on that thing because I don't freaking know. I will hear something and I will just repeat whatever I just heard into Google Translate and it will tell me how it's spelled and which one was a word and, those were 2 words together and it's like a whole sentence. That wasn't just one word.
I struggle with that a lot.
Google Translate helps a lot. Use voice to text, man.
When I'm listening to something even my wife is saying, and I repeat it like, what? And then she says it slower, and those are two different words.
Yeah,
they were crammed together into one.
Blended together.
When you say it in 2 words, yeah, I know exactly what you said.
And the only way to solve that problem is to just listen over and over and over. More listening, more immersion, because your brain, it's not even an active thing that you do. Your brain just slowly starts to realize there's a separation between these two sounds, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's 2 words, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a particle. Oh, this is how the sentence ended here. Oh, this is common at the end of these sentences. Oh, this is masculine, feminine, whatever it is. Your brain just slowly starts to pick up on that as you just listen over and over and over and over and over, even passively to some degree. I think passive listening is good, and you should do it. But I want to talk a little bit about the dangers of doing my method. It's a dangerous method, people.
Mess yourself up a little bit.
First of all, this method's doable. It works really well, and it's wild, and it's awesome. But the method works. It works so well that it's not because it works so well, but I probably won't be doing this method again.
Mm.
And part of the reason is because I had my headphones in all the time, right? I have a family, right? Like, I got a wife, I got kids, I work, right? Like I realized the cost of learning Spanish was more than just the time. It's the opportunity cost of whatever else I would have been doing with that time.
Yeah.
And there are pictures, and this happened to me through, basically, we have a Chromecast plugged into our television, and sometimes we'll just turn on the TV, and the Chromecast has a bunch of photos loaded into it, and we just see photos of my family and us and the kids from, the past 8 years, right? And I realized there's a specific time window where every picture of me, I either had my headphones in or I had the Bluetooth headphones like dangling around my neck. It was kind of like the one, it was one where you could do that.
Right.
And I was like, ugh, something just like really hit me about that. Like, I'm supposed to be paying attention to my kids. I'm playing. I'm supposed to be having fun. It's not enough for me to just click the button and be like, oh, it's off now. Like, it's fine. I'm paying attention. I'm here. I'm here for you. What do you want? Hurry up, because I got to get back to the thing, you know? I was missing out on like young, vital, precious years of my kid's life by being so obsessively enveloped in the one thing that I was doing at the time, which was, I gotta freaking learn Spanish. I don't even know why. No, I was not doing this for work. I was doing this for fun. This was a hobby that I was putting in more hours than I was putting in at my actual job. And it did start to affect my relationships with the people I love most. And that became unacceptable for me. At first, I thought, what's the big deal? Oh, you guys are being ridiculous. Like, it's just fine. Look, listen. And let me speak Japanese to you for like 10 minutes. Oh, here, look, I can do this whole thing in Spanish. They don't care.
No.
They don't care. And most people don't care. I have a few people in my life, Eric is one of them, that'll be like, dope, let's talk languages. But for the most part, yeah. Well,
particularly now that you're learning Swedish.
Yes, because I started learning
because he knows
his
Swedish.
Language, yeah. But like you or Landon or Eric, I can count them on one hand of people that I'm like, all right, let's talk languages, and it'll be a fun, engaging conversation. My wife and children are not, although.
Well, your daughter is learning Spanish.
She is learning Old English. And Spanish.
That too.
And Latin. She's learning Latin now. She's doing a very good job. She's learning French. I'm teaching her French. Our nighttime routine consists of recitations in 5 different languages every night. Wow. Anyways, it's a blast. I know I'm making them into little versions of myself. I don't know how to be a parent otherwise. And as if they're not interested, they're out. That's fine. I got to be okay with that. And that's another trouble that's going to be in my future where they're like, Dad, I don't want to do the things you like. No. Oh. But I have to be okay with that because I know what happens if I try to push it,
Yeah.
But my language learning affected my relationships with my family, and I will never be doing that method again to that extent. For Swedish, it took me closer to 8 months before I got that listening fluency with the news that I can just listen to now. I know everything they're saying, but double the time. And I'm only able to listen maybe 4 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day. And only when I'm alone. And whenever my family, and here's another thing I did, I ditched the Bluetooth headphones. Bluetooth is great, but it's too good. It's too easy to just like hide it or put it in my ear or just dangle it around my neck or whatever. It's too easy. So I am on wired headphones now. I'm on the old school wired mini jack. And of course, my phone still has a mini jack. A lot of phones don't.
A lot of phones don't know.
But I've opted for that. My Bluetooth headphones broke, but I didn't buy new ones after they broke. Right. And so I use wired headphones. It's more obvious. It's more of a hassle to get out. If I'm going to start listening to the language, I'm like really like dedicating time to listen.
About it.
It's less like reflexive and okay, oh, talk to me now. Okay, now don't talk to me. Oh, didn't you know I'm listening? Oh, now it's off. You don't know that, but you know, like I know that. So tell me now. You know, I didn't. It's repeat everything you said for the last minute. I wasn't listening. Like that's not happening anymore.
Good.
That's not good. And I through using wired headphones, yes, I can listen less often, but that's okay. If you're single, like, do you have no reason to not be fluent in like 8 languages? But if, you know, you're not, I should have, if I was doing this method back in the day, man, oh my gosh, I hate that it took me this long to come up with this method.
Figure it out.
And now I can't even really do it to the extent that I otherwise would, because it would ruin my family.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a bit of a warning that this method works extremely well and you will get out of it what you put into it and you will become fluent in the equivalent of 1 semester, right? If you're doing a Romance language, if you're doing Japanese,
if you're doing a language that is close
Japanese,
to your native language,
to your native language, yeah. If you Romance or Germanic, you can do it. Asian or otherwise, maybe African, or it's going to take you a lot longer. I started looking into learning Samoan. There's just not enough resources, and movies don't usually get dubbed into Samoan, so it's like, all right, sorry guys, can't learn your language. The ones that have the most resources attached to them are Hawaiian and Maori, which is New Zealand, and but that's because the culture that took over those places feels bad that they ruined the culture and has now put money into trying to, but it's too late.
Preserve it.
There's not very many native Hawaiian speakers left anymore. Like it's too late.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of native Samoan speakers, but there's no money to prop up that language to propagate it abroad. And so it's like, okay, the only places that have the money are the ones where the language is kind of is almost dead, which means I don't want to learn it. Except I've changed my mind on this, by the way, because I studied Arabic for a very long time, and I'm not going there.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm not going to go there. And I've realized that I'm learning languages just for fun. I don't care if I go there or not, which is what's led me now to start learning Old English. I don't care. I don't care if I'm not going to go back in time. I'm not going to a lot of these places I learn languages of. Like I think it's dope, and I'm going to learn all this stuff, and I'm going to like basically like commune with dead people. So that's what I'm going to be doing. What are you doing?
Well,
so
hopefully communicating with my wife's parents.
That's very good.
At some point.
It's very helpful. Why not both? ¿Por qué no los dos?
Talking about things that can hurt your confidence or whatever, there's nothing that'll hurt it more than going to the country you've been trying to learn its language and not understanding a damn word anyone says. You know,
and it's also harder once because the news is one thing where it's a very well enunciated person. The news today is such and such, and then you go to hear how real people speak.
Really speak.
Even in Spanish. Yes, I understand news perfectly in Spanish. Same thing. Like I talked to a Mexican friend of mine not too long ago, and I was like, bro, can you speak a little slower? Like, I'm sorry. I thought I was fluent. Okay, I thought I was fluent. I could, but I don't know what you're saying. Can you slow down a bit?
And particularly with Latin American Spanish, there's so many countries that it's different. It's really different just in Latin America.
Yeah.
Like if you go to Panama and then go to like the Dominican Republic.
Oh, the DR speaks.
Almost like you're listening to a different language.
The DR, the Caribbean and the Puerto Rico, like those places, they like drop the S a lot of times. They'll say espera un momento. Like, it's almost like an F or an H. It's different. And you just in Buenos Aires and Argentina,
totally different.
Very different.
Totally different.
Castellano is what they call it. It's like totally different. And sometimes like an audiobook, like for The Witcher, I think the only Witcher audiobook in Spanish I was able to find was Argentinian. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to do this. And it was actually pretty hard for me to understand.
Yeah.
I didn't actually end up finishing that book.
It's funny. Like I don't even speak Spanish, I learned very, very, very basic Spanish in high school, a very long time ago. And it's certainly true for me that I understand a lot more of what I heard when I was in Spain last month than I have ever understood when I was in Latin American countries.
That's funny.
So take that for what it's worth. I don't know what that means, but even like watching Spanish film, say,
Spanish film is great. It's very good.
Laberinto
del Fauno.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
movie I literally always forget the title of.
That's true. I think even when we,
I don't think I've ever remembered that movie's title. One time I've tried to bring it up. Pan's Labyrinth. I can understand that movie pretty well. But yeah, like I go to, I don't know, Guatemala or something. Freaking lost. Like no idea what I was saying.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not trying to learn Spanish right now. I'm trying to learn Portuguese. But anyway, hopefully that's helpful. Hope you guys enjoyed that.
Yep. This is good stuff, guys. It works. One other thing I will say, I would often encounter like headaches. Like my head would just hurt. And I knew it was because of the language. And I'm like, my brain is not taking this well. This is killing me. That I learned after many times of this happening that these headaches would occur right before I made big breakthroughs. And so the night is darkest before the dawn. Like if you're feeling like, oh, I got to give up. I'm not learning it. It's not working. I'm not getting it. This one word I keep getting caught up on. Oh, I don't feel it's starting to hurt my brain. I'm just not getting it. Like the pain in the brain is a good sign. It actually means that your brain is working overtime. This whole method is just tricking your brain into understanding a new language. Yep. You're trying to trick it. Because it knows you're trying to trick it into that you have to learn this language to survive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't want to do it. It's like, no, we already know how to communicate. We do it every day. You don't need to do this. Speak English. Stop it. And you're teaching it, bruh, English don't cut it no more. Like this is a whole new world we live in now. Listen to all the immersion that I'm faking around myself all the time with my headphones. Don't you understand? We don't live in England land anymore. We live in Spain right now. We're in Spain, bruh. Get with the program. Yeah. And then your brain slowly, it's not the most comfortable thing for your brain to do. But after the headaches, I noticed like, boom, huge breakthroughs. And all of a sudden I'm just like clarity and like my brain stops hurting and something happened. Something happened with the synapses.
It was a new neural pathway.
Exactly.
That's the tough thing. Probably not a tangent you need to go on. When you're a baby, you're a brand new baby.
Yeah, the most fluid brain.
Your brain is fluid, meaning like it's all connected to each other. But
there's no highways technically.
Yeah, in order to develop a brain that can quickly recall information, which is vital for understanding language. You have to be able to hear a word, hear 5-6 words in close proximity within a second or two. Wow, bam, 5 words were just thrown at my brain. And I understood all of those and I'm still engaged and I'm still listening. This requires the brain to go, here's a really easy little pathway from here to here so that we can send that signal really fast. Okay, you did that for your mother language
when you were very little.
As you were a little baby and as you grew up. And now those highways are useless to you.
Yes.
They're useless. That's why it's so hard. And you're having to form new ones.
They're ingrained, and your brain will take those highways to go, even if it takes longer, because it's
quite literally painful, hurts your brain physically to form the new ones.
Yeah.
So anyway, take that for what it's worth. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Well, guys,
go learn whatever language you want to learn now.
Any language. Let me know how it goes, and then tell me why it went so perfectly.
And if you have other suggestions to add to the method, feel free to share those as well. Till next time, peace out.